Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire, who never runs out of ways of opening the show for me by counting me in. So, how are you, Kieran?
I'm good. It feels that football's almost back. I hate international breaks. I don't know about you. They do absolutely nothing for me. Great performance by England, though.
I hated it about 10 minutes after the end of the England games. I watched the England game, which I thought was very good of me, considering I'd sat through the previous two. But no, it was very impressive, right up to the point where Gabriel Clark, who I like, nice fella, a bit intense, good journalist, interviewing Thomas Tuchel about a 5-goal win away from home with the World Cup coming up. And one of his questions was Mark Gahey unsettled when he arrived at the training camp because he didn't get his move to Liverpool? I said, what? And Thomas Tuchel looked at him essentially and then thought about the question and thought, anyway, no. He's a very strong player for Crystal Palace. So why? Just let it. It's just incredible. The press are obsessed with the fact that Liverpool didn't get their own way. If that move, Mark Gahey's move, had been to West Ham and it didn't happen, it wouldn't even have been on the moving strap underneath whoever it is who hosts. It's not Jim White anymore, is it? Poor old Jim's stuck with your best mate on a weekday morning now, rather than making up stories about the transfer window. It's Newsday, Kieran, and we've got some big news, haven't we? Because as social media, the Man City thing, it's all sorted, kid. It's all done. Let's go through the 115 charges one by one, as everybody got excited yesterday.
Yes, there was a bit of an overreaction. Manchester City and the Premier League put out a joint statement earlier this week to say that the associated party transactions disagreement that they've had has been resolved, a settlement has been made, and that no further comments will be made, which I don't think will go down particularly well with an awful lot of club owners, because they want to know what is the nature of this settlement, what are the implications, just not for Manchester City, but for other clubs as well. For people not familiar with what happened, it's a bit of a history story. When Newcastle United were acquired by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, within a very short period of time, the Premier League brought in a new set of rules, which effectively meant that they had a power of veto, or certainly a power to change the value of sponsorship arrangements for anything over £1 million. Those have sort of finessed over the past few years. Manchester City weren't happy with them. I think Newcastle, Villa and Forest also voted against them, but it went through the Premier League executive meetings, because it's a 2/3 majority. I think it was 16-4 in favour. So the Premier League seemed to be happy. City said, well, hold on. If you're going to make it more difficult for clubs to arrange sponsorship deals because you think that's giving them an unfair advantage, what about all of these clubs that have got interest-free loans from owners? And the Premier League said, oh, we don't see it like this. So City said, well, let's go to mediation, and broadly found in favour of City. So what does this mean? Well, the simple answer is we're not certain. But if I was Manchester City, having got the majority of things in their favour when they sued the Premier League last year, or when they took the Premier League to arbitration last year, you would have thought that they must feel they've got a very strong case. And I think the big sponsorship deal that people are talking about, I think there's one with an Abu Dhabi bank. There's another with Etihad, which is likely to be for stadium naming rights, front of shirt deal. Potentially that could be expanded to the training facility as well. When it was originally signed in, I think around about 2010, 2011, it was worth £35 million a year. That was deemed to be okay then, although there were grumbles. Manchester City are a far bigger club 15 years later than they were then. Are the Premier League going to be able to say this isn't an overvalue? I think they're going to find it that much more difficult. So could it be that Manchester City and the Premier League said, okay, this is what we're going to do in terms of this valuation? The Premier League will say Manchester City have agreed that the 8 APT rules are okay going forwards. Again, my understanding is that Manchester City actually don't give a hoot about these loans, because Brighton Hove Albion, Tony Bloom's lent Brighton 400 million quid. Brighton aren't a rival for Manchester City. So therefore, they don't actually particularly care. It was simply just a way of being a bit awkward, making things a bit more uncomfortable for the Premier League. There will have been costs involved, but City will see that as just a cost of doing business. I think they will come away happy, and the Premier League will just go, well, we've got this one over the line.
A lot of people getting their knickers in a twist, Kieran, when this news first came out, because they thought it was the 115 cases, and when they realised it wasn't, they went, well, it just proves that the Man City are going to get away with that as well, because the Premier League have caved in. And it was a strange statement issued yesterday, which seemed to imply that Man City said, yeah, we there was some confusion about whether we were breaking the rules or not, but that seems to have been cleared up, which I should point out to City. UEFA won't take that as an argument, as Palace have found to their cost. But it's really odd that people are saying, well, this is clearly a precursor. If they're, the Man City and the Premier League are now best of buddies, they're walking off like Humphrey Bogart and the other reigns at the end of Casablanca. Claude Rains at the end of Casablanca. This is the beginning of a beautiful relationship. So do you think it has any bearing whatsoever on the outcome of the next case?
No, the two cases are completely independent of one another. The 115 charges, they refer to the period 2009 to 2018. APT2, for want of a better phrase, refers to...
I thought that had been cancelled.
Well, it's sort of been approved.
Okay, right.
That applies to the current position. So from a time basis, they're independent. I think the cases won't necessarily be the same ones. Does it show that the Manchester City and the Premier League can get round a table and thrash out a settlement? Yes, it can. Does that mean that there's an opportunity for a negotiated settlement for the 115 charges? Conceptually, yes. But given that the legal costs are likely to be in the region of 100 to 120 million pounds, can you imagine how the other club owners are going to react to say, oh yeah, we've just subsidised all of this, and in the end they just said, oh, it's just a bit of a misunderstanding. Yeah, we're all friends. We'll give you a bit of a fine. I don't think that would be acceptable, even though my understanding of the reaction of some club owners, and I stress it is some and it's not all, that they feel that the Manchester City thing's been overblown. They weren't interested in the settlement because, again, they don't see themselves as rivals for City. So, why incur all of those costs? At the same time, some of the big six clubs, the Super League six clubs, they are much more minded to get some form of resolution to this because they feel that they've lost trophies. They might be able to sue Manchester City potentially for loss of earnings if during this period that Manchester City are guilty of the most significant charges and so on. So we wait and we wait and we wait.
It's a sad reflection, Kieran. It's also a sad reflection. I'm not entirely sure what reflection is. Probably one of the reasons I failed both my physics and chemistry O levels. But it's a sad, plus poor teaching, obviously. It's a sad reflection and a complete lack of interest in the subjects. It's a sad reflection on modern football, Kieran. Our next two stories involve legal action and substantial sums of money. The first one is about Nottingham Forest, and you have to feel for the owner of Nottingham Forest, who's a very shy, modest man who would have been very reluctant, I imagine, to be forced into taking legal action. But hey-ho, you have to do what you have to do, about 15 times a year in his case, but there you are. So the FA and Nottingham Forest, and this one, Forest won. Yes,
this was a consequence. People may recall a couple of seasons ago, Nottingham Forest lost a match, and they feel that the refereeing decisions didn't go their way. And they put out a tweet to that effect. And I think the consensus view was, it's a bit of a strange thing to do. Refereeing decisions sometimes go against you. But there was a KC who described Nottingham Forest's reaction as somewhat hysterical. And he then was involved in a separate case involving Manchester City. And Nottingham Forest felt, well, hold on, if you're going to come out in public and say the reaction is somewhat hysterical, how can you then be an arbiter as to whether Nottingham Forest are innocent or guilty of a further charge? So therefore, Forest decided that they wanted to determine whether or not there was apparent bias. Not bias, but apparent bias. So I think apparent bias is, in my view, reaction of the man of the infamous Clapham omnibus. And you go, that seems a bit, if he said that, how can he do that? And the arbitration came in favour of Nottingham Forest. And therefore, I think they do feel vindicated. It doesn't mean that the tweet was justified. That's a separate issue. It's everybody is entitled to a trial or a hearing by independent people, and I think that's the most important thing. And in a world, and there's countries which historically have been bastions of democracy, where you've got people who are trying to take down the rule of law and the power of law and the independence of the judiciary. I can absolutely understand on this particular case where Forest have come from. Again, doesn't mean that the original tweet was perhaps in the best interests of all concerned.
Most of the reporting indicated that the FA had to pay a significant sum to Nottingham Forest. Does anyone know what that significant sum actually was?
No. All we know, there was compensation involved. I think from Forest's point of view, they felt that they wanted to get a fair hearing and that they weren't getting it.
And it looks like, Kieran, the FA could be in for another significant sum to be paid out if Lucas Paquetá, he's considering what to do next. But one of the options is very much suing the FA for loss of earnings. And I have to say, Kieran, this is one of those cases where, like a lot of football fans, when he was accused by the FA of spot fixing, you don't really look into it. You go, "Oh, he shouldn't have done that. That's terrible." And then when it's concluded and you look into it, you think, what were the FA thinking? It just seems like a ludicrous charge to make against him when you looked at the facts as they would present, which of course what we should do before we wrote. That's the problem with modern football, isn't it? Another of the problems with modern football. I was one of those people who just, they wouldn't charge him if he hadn't done it, would they? And then afterwards you read the facts and you go, why? So
yes, this is a fascinating case. Friend of the show, Nick DeMarco, was defending Paqueta and successfully did so. But when you looked at the written publication, and there was 300 pages to wade your way through, it was gobsmacking in terms of the ineptitude and the amateurishness of the Football Association. The accusation against Paqueta that there was any spot fixing in terms of getting yellow cards and that people have benefited from it. But when you looked at the FA's prosecution, first of all, they did not employ an expert witness. They effectively used their own man. Now, the trouble is that if you or I, following a match, said, he dived, he did this, he did that, that in itself would not be enough to win a legal case. And it does appear that the FA's main man was convinced that Paqueta had done this spot fixing. The Football Association did not appear to then get that checked. They did no independent assessment of their own case. They then, towards the end, disagreed with their own witness.
I get that. Could you try again? Disagree is a Malaysian rock band which performs mostly.
Thanks, Siri.
Who knew? I didn't know there was a Malaysian rock band called Disagree.
I didn't either. Very bizarre.
Have you been trying to book tickets for a Malaysian rock band? No, you'd be a cover band. You'd be a cover band of Malaysian rock band Disagree. That's hilarious. That could have been worse.
It could have been far worse, yes. I think it's fair to say that the FA's main witness folded like a cheap suit, I believe is the phrase, under cross-examination. Paqueta's team put forward their own expert witnesses, including an ex-referee, Mark Clattenburg, and some statistical experts who didn't seem to get any cross-examination themselves. So the case for the FA appeared to be very weak. There was a lot of confirmation bias, and it was not backed up by independent analysis. And Paqueta is therefore cleared of the charges. Could he therefore sue the FA for loss of earnings? Because there was an opportunity to join Manchester City, who pay substantially higher wages. There is the fact that he will have suffered reputational damage. Could that impact upon his image rights over the course of the past couple of years and so on? We genuinely don't know. So I think that's a case of wait and see. But the FA have suffered two pretty appalling defeats over the course of the last week. And not the fact that they lost them, but the way that they lost them is a cause for concern. We'll be coming on to the independent regulator in a little while. But I've said I don't want an independent regulator. I want a strong football association. I think this is further evidence that we do not have a strong football association, and that governance and management and control are questionable at times. Martin Ziegler in the Times, I think he wrote something that sort of the legal team at the FA itself has slimmed down, either people leaving, but it does make you wonder, why on earth did they go ahead with this? And again, legal costs for this, given that it was a long hearing and an extremely long verdict, are going to be substantial.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Introducing the perfect companion to your morning listening routine. AG1's clinically backed formula is now flavor-packed with 3 new delicious flavors: tropical, berry, and citrus. Start the day on a high note with probiotics that taste like the tropics. Mix it up with micronutrients that taste like berry or citrus. And take it all the way back with the classic AG1 Original with notes of pineapple and vanilla. Do your health a flavor, or 4, with AG1 Next Gen, the daily health drink. Learn more at drinkag1.com.
It was only a few weeks ago, Kieran, we spoke to Neil Doncaster, head honcho of Scottish football, who talked about the regulator being an English solution to an English problem, because he thought that the Scottish FA was strong and were therefore the regulator of Scottish football. It's quite clearly not the case here. The other thing with Paquetá that we shouldn't overlook, never mind loss of earnings and reputational damage, is the anxiety he must have gone through during that year-long investment when he can't play football, which is what they live to do. He's got this hanging over him. There's all this nonsense from the FA saying, well, he was doing it through his aunt in Brazil, and the defence guy, he phones her up every Monday, and he has done ever since he came over here. It's just ludicrous, kid. As each week goes by, they just appear less and less fit for purpose, the FA. It's astonishing. Arguably the biggest story of recent days, though, Kieran, unfortunately we weren't able to talk about it in detail on the actual day it happened, was Daniel Levy stepping down at Spurs. Already his almost 25 years there is being reevaluated by a lot of football journalists, but it seems that since then people have been hovering around to take his place. What do you make? You've always been a fan of the way Tottenham do business, but do you think history will be kind to Daniel Levy?
We can answer that in 5 years' time.
Yeah,
this is a classic. It depends.
Yeah.
Daniel Levy has created the groundwork. He has laid the foundations for Tottenham Hotspur to be more competitive in future years than they were historically. If you take a look at the period 1992 to 2001, which is prior to Daniel Levy joining the board of directors, the average position that Spurs finished in the Premier League was 11th. And they were always in the Premier League. They never looked likely to go down. But at the start of the season, nobody said, I think this could be Spurs here. Yeah. They got a chance of going. So they used to bumble along. And you and I, we grew up with Spurs being a cup team, but never really being competitive as far as winning the league is concerned. And nothing wrong with that. And Spurs used to have fantastic teams, or rather fantastic individuals. And we remember our Diles and Hoddle and Archibald and Garth Crooks and all of these players. But they never really had a big enough squad to be competitive. So what Daniel Levy has done is that he's moved Spurs from being 11th to 5th or 6th. They got the 5th or 6th highest wage bill. They got the 5th or 6th highest investment in players and so on. So in my view, they probably punch slightly above their weight, but not excessively so in terms of what we've seen on the pitch. I think what people are also forgetting is that before Daniel Levy arrived, Chelsea were not a competitive team in terms of winning the big trophies. They were a cup team. Manchester City were lovable.
Yeah.
But they were the Keystone Cops of English football. And they were not seen. So the huge investment that we've seen from both Abramovich and Sheikh Mansour has meant that the Premier League has become more challenging for anybody that wants to win trophies. So my view is that Daniel Levy has given Spurs the opportunity to sign more players, because matchday income is probably going to quadruple from where they were at the old White Hart Lane. As far as commercial income is concerned, that will have trebled, and he deserves an awful lot of credit for that. Spurs fans will say, hold on, Kieran, before Daniel Levy arrived, we paid mid-tier prices. Spurs now, based on my figures, Spurs generate the second highest amount of matchday revenue per fan. And my mate Paul, who's my neighbour, who's a Spurs fan, says, okay, if I'm expected to pay either the top or the second highest level of season ticket prices, then I expect to be top too. I don't care about all the rest of the nonsense. Nothing to do with me. Brands and sponsorships and so on. I'm the punter who's having to pay this, and you can understand it from that perspective. Daniel Levy has done extremely well out of Spurs. His salary over the past 25 years, he started on 125 grand, and he left, and he was on well over 3 million. He also owns just under 30% of the Lewis Family Trust, which we must state has got absolutely nothing to do with Joe Lewis, who themselves, between the Joe Lewis Trust, the Family Trust, and Daniel Levy, they own the majority of ENIC, which is Spurs' biggest shareholder. That means that Daniel Levy's share is going to be worth somewhere between, based on my figures, between £800 million and £1 billion. So he has done extremely well out of Spurs. Should he sell his shares? Should there be a takeover? Which brings us to the second issue that we've seen. Spurs have put out a strongly worded statement to say, if anybody's interested in buying Spurs, forget it. We're not for sale. There's no such thing as not for sale in business. If the money's right, there's always a deal. Amanda Staveley has been interested. There's been another consortium from the United States that's been interested. I think that they're probably worth somewhere in the region of £3.5 to £4 billion. And Daniel Levy will get his stake of that if he chooses to sell. So that's where we are. Now, as far as those two potential investors are concerned, Spurs put out a statement. Because they are what we refer to as a quoted company, a company which has its shares traded, it effectively means that Staveley and the other investors can't do anything now for at least 3 months. There's nothing to stop somebody else coming in. We await to see with interest. I think the statement which came from Spurs, which, let's face it blindsided everybody. And the initial reaction was, I hope he's not ill. I hope he's not having to stand down. And it became increasingly evident that this was a sacking by ENIC.
Well, that's one of the questions I want to ask you about, Kieran. Can you just clarify for me, Kieran, because I could hardly hear it for the raising of my own eyebrows. His personal share is worth how much? His personal share in the Lewis family?
Well, he's got just under 30% of ENIC. ENIC own the vast majority of Spurs. If Spurs get sold for £4 billion, I reckon he's looking at the thick end of £800 million.
Wow. So the next question, so he's left as a sort of power broker here then. Would he be part of any potential takeover bid? Does he own enough to be able to prevent a takeover bid he wouldn't like, or to encourage one that he would?
If the Lewis Family Trust decide to sell their investment in Spurs, he effectively has a choice as to whether he goes along with that or not. I think he would find it difficult to put up any barriers, though, because he would be left as a minority shareholder, albeit a significant minority shareholder in the Joe Lewis Trust. It wouldn't be in his interests to not go along with it.
One of the comments I saw on on the BBC report of this from a Spurs fan was like he's treated it like it's his own money, which you kind of go, well, that's probably a good thing to an extent. But that was almost the implication, because I'm interested that you used the word sacking, because that's what I was going to ask you, because it certainly came out of the blue, because we've always on this pod, you've always, whenever you say what's the best run club, your answer is Spurs, essentially as a business. But the statement from Enoch did seem to indicate that we've had enough now. We're financially well run, but we're not winning things. So essentially, they're agreeing with your next door neighbour, which I thought you kind of go, well, that's the manager's task. You sack the manager for that, or you get a more high profile manager, or you spend more money on players. The idea that you get a new type of Daniel Levy and that suddenly unlocks the key to success seems a strange one to me. But you're fairly certain this is a sacking. This is...
Well, yes, it's the Lewis family saying we want the club to go in a different direction. They've got a new chief executive, formerly from Arsenal. They've got other executives have come in. I think one of the criticisms that was levelled at Daniel Levy was that he was a micromanager. He had to be involved in every single decision. Some of the critics said that led to the delay in the finalisation of the stadium because he wanted to sign off on everything. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Dave Whelan was exactly the same at Wigan, I can assure you. And he brought Wigan forward significantly. But it looks as if the family trust want a new direction. They want to loosen the purse strings. Will that work? The simple answer is we've got absolutely no idea, because the quality of the signings are far more important than the quantity of money that's been spent on them. Certainly Spurs, one of the achievements of Daniel Levy is that Spurs, probably 8 years out of 10, were spending the lowest proportion of revenue on wages of any club in the Premier League. They are a textbook case study of how to run a business within the entertainment industry. Remember, Spurs are not a football club; they're an entertainment industry club, or an entertainment industry entity, because they now have more non-football events than football taking place at the stadium.
We spoke last week, Kieran, about the independent regulator recruiting staff, and this week we find out what it is they want to recruit the staff for, because they're starting to put a little bit of meat on the bones of their plans, and in particular when it comes to owners and directors.
That's right. So what it used to be known as the fit and proper test. It then became the OADT, the owners and directors test, and it's now the ODSI, the owners, directors and senior executive. So if you like an acronym, you're going to be a very happy bunny indeed. And what's happened here is that the IFR, because it is backed by statute, because it is linked to the ability of the regulator to have legal enforcement, it will be able to consider domestic and international cases when looking at the financial background of the individuals concerned. It will be able to check with banks as to where the money's held. So therefore, in terms of both proof of funds and so on, and it will be able to get in contact with other regulatory bodies as well to try to do some more background. Can it also get rid of an owner? The answer here is yes. But this is where I'm slightly cautious, because if I was an owner who wanted to get a club promoted, I could now spend all of my money, and if it doesn't work out, the regulator takes over, and I just walk away into the sunset. And it means that the regulator, who's going to pay for the administration of these clubs if the regulator effectively becomes the appointer of somebody to run a club in administration or similar. So that's my one slight caveat here. But the IFR will be able to hold both clubs and individuals to account. and when needed, to give financial penalties, public censure, to require the owner to divest from the club. So the EFL have said to Chancery, look, if you can't run it, go and find somebody else to do it. I think the IFR will have bigger teeth than that.
Although that strikes me as one of those words, require, that a leading lawyer might find a completely different definition for if asked to. I feel I should explain to the audience, Kieran, while there was a slight pause there, it was my fault because I lifted my hand up to scratch a small itch, and your teacher's instinct came in and assumed I was putting my hand up to ask a question, which is why there's a pause on both sides. I apologise for that, everybody. It's not BAFTA season anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It's an interesting illustration of how Scottish football works, Kieran. Off the back of our discussion with Neil Doncaster, head honcho of Scottish football, the Daily Record picked up on it. And obviously, for reasons, we know why they do it, but it was the Celtic Rangers, which is a very small part of our discussion with Neil Doncaster, was Celtic and Rangers. But that's what the Daily Record picked up on, and Neil Doncaster explaining that money that Celtic have had from the Champions League is why they've been way ahead of everybody else when it comes to spending in previous years, except it seems this summer, and Celtic are blaming UEFA. Now, obviously, I'm all for anyone blaming UEFA for anything, but it seems to stand in contradiction to what Neil Doncaster was telling us, doesn't it, this story?
Yes. So my understanding of the story is that last Friday there was a meeting between Celtic and some of the fan groups, which is all to be encouraged. Dialogue, transparency, communication. I'm all in favour of that. I think there was exchanges of views, which, again, nothing wrong with that. And then bizarrely, and I use the word bizarrely, it's 8:42 p.m. on a Saturday night is a strange time to put out a very, very long press release where the Celtic board are effectively saying failure to qualify for the Champions League, nothing to do with us, Gov. And they got knocked out by a side with a fraction of their revenues, with a fraction of the cost of their squad, with a fraction of their wage bill and so on. And that's why I think Celtic fans were fairly cheesed off. Rangers fans, of course, they're not enamoured with their start to the season. But as you rightly pointed out, Kevin, it says the club's been successful, but we're going to protect our self-sustaining model, and we don't have a choice in this because it's all down to UEFA. UEFA's sustainability regulations, where the club must comply. And it says wages and transfer spending are strictly governed by UEFA. Absolutely, that is the case. But here's the deal. Under UEFA's rules, you can only spend £70 on wages for every £100 that you generate. In the most recent season, Celtic spent £53 of revenue on wages, and that £53 was for every member of staff. Under the UEFA rules, it's actually the player wages that only count, so that's probably going to drop it to something like 45. Celtic have done fantastically well, and let me be completely transparent here. I'm a shareholder in Celtic. The value of my shares has increased by 50% over the last 2 to 3 years. They have done very, very well indeed. Now, I didn't buy them as an investment. I buy shares in listed football clubs because it gives me access to slightly more information. So it doesn't mean that I'm a Celtic fan or I'm not a Celtic fan. It's done purely from my point of view, being able to access information. Celtic have made profits in 10 years out of the last 12. Again, an incredible achievement. And one of the years in which they made a loss, hey, it was COVID. Everybody made a loss. So Celtic, magnificent support base, same with Rangers, same for all of Scotland in my view. As Neil always say, we get a higher proportion of the population coming to watch live football than any other country in Europe. Celtic have made player profits of £140 million over the course of the last decade. They've got a business model, it works, but it's not enough for the fans because the Celtic fan base, hold the board to account, and they believe that they should be in the Champions League. Not as a matter of course, they got to get there on merit, but there was huge disappointment. I think Brendan Rodgers has sort of been muttering that there's been a lack of investment in the squad. And this has led to this press release, which I've got to be honest, I'm not involved in the PR industry. It's gone down like a lead balloon. It's been criticised by fans. It's been criticised in the media. It's been criticised by pundits and so on.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
We mentioned this in passing, Kieran, the first time we spoke after the transfer window closed. But I think it's worth going over it again. I mean, it's not that long ago when Rangers and Celtic Rangers in particular, could attract some of the biggest names in European football to go and play there. But this window in particular, it's noticeable how little Rangers and Celtic were spending on players compared. Now, obviously, comparing it to the Premier League is ridiculous because the figures there are stupid. But still, this window of all windows, and it does make you wonder because there's still massive clubs. They should still be able to attract players there. And you'd think, they're spending 3-4 million quid. You'd think that Rangers and Celtic should be able to spend 20-30 million pound to attract some of the best talent in Europe to go there. I mean, it's a fantastic city to play football in. It's a fantastic country to live and work in. And yet it seems they're not even trying to compete anymore to get the best talent that Europe has to offer.
That's right. And we've often said that success and punching above your weight comes down to three things: opportunities, resources, and executive decision making. And as an outside observer, I think Celtic's board spend enough money to win the Scottish Premiership, and they don't feel they have to go beyond that. The Celtic fan base don't see their rivals as being other Scottish clubs, with the exception of Rangers, of course. They see their rivals as being what you might call the mid-tier countries in Europe in terms of Scotland's ability to compete in the Champions League. And they also want to be hosting Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, and so on by getting into the Champions League. And that's been denied this season. Somebody has to answer the question. The club said, well, it's nothing to do with our refusal to sign players. It's all to do with UEFA. The numbers don't back that up. Celtic had an awful lot of headroom, and I can assure you they got an incredible amount of cash. Celtic's cash is probably equivalent to the total revenue, I would say, of 10 out of the 12 Scottish clubs put together, with the exception of Celtic and Rangers.
Wow. Okay. 3 clubs in England, Kieran, with loans, shares, loans, whichever way around you want to put it. Starting with Hull City. Yes,
I think we've seen 2 similar activities from Hull and Preston, where owners have initially lent money to clubs. And the owners have now said, got to be honest, the club's never going to be in a position where it can repay those loans. So what we're going to do, we're going to say, a bit like the bank of mum and dad, nominally it's a loan. Tell you what, we're going to convert it into shares. Now, Hull have had a few financial problems. Some fans are putting 2 and 2 together and getting perhaps more than 4, or perhaps they are getting 4. I genuinely don't know. The whole balance sheet with a lot of debt on it doesn't look too good. If I was looking to sell the club, what would I be doing? I'd be trying to tidy things up. And one way of tidying up a balance sheet is to convert loans into shares. Is the owner effectively saying, look, if the club is sold, I'm not going to be coming to a new owner saying you need to go and repay me money in 2027, 2028. Just give me a payout at the day of the transaction and I walk away into the sunset. So that could be the case, or it could be they just decided there's no chance of ever being in a position to pay that money back. So let's just go through the reality of the situation and say it's debt that can't be afforded to be repaid. Let's get rid of it. Exactly the same thing, and I think that was around about £14 million. Exactly the same thing has happened at Preston. Here we're looking at around about 30 million. The Hemmings family have been putting in £1 million a month for practically every month for however long I can remember. So here they've written off some loans into shares. Fans are therefore saying, they're contacting us and saying, does this mean the club's for sale? It doesn't mean that the club is for sale, but what it does mean is that if the club was up for sale, it looks a bit tidier. It looks slightly neater from a takeover perspective, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a hurry or there's a desire to sell the club from the current owners.
A Premier League club as well has done similar.
That's right, and I think this one is probably a wee bit different. This is Everton. The Friedkin Group have made a good start. Everton have a decent start to the season. Jack Grealish on fire. There's a feel-good factor around the club as well, and it looks as if they put in around about £45 million. That will provide working capital. I think this is more likely to be a cash injection than a debt issue.
Okay. Our penultimate story, Kieran, I've been looking forward to because there aren't many opportunities where you get to use the word FIFA and waka waka. Unless you're saying Infantino's definitely gone waka waka, isn't he? But this is... I'm going to leave you to explain this, Kieran, but I'm just going to enjoy saying one more time. This next story, Kieran, involves FIFA and waka waka. Ew, talk again, who gives a... We won the FA Cup, waka waka.
Yes. Let's go back to the 2010 World Cup, which took place in South Africa. Great World Cup to attend. I was there. I was at Port Elizabeth and Cape Town. Had an absolutely fantastic time. And anybody that's been to a World Cup, even if you're not going to the matches, it's not the fan zones, the bonhomie, the opportunity to talk and exchange views and chat about football from people all over the world is bucket list ambition, I think, for many fans. The FIFA World Cup song was from Shakira, who I believe is a pop beat lady. Not really my scene, but it was a very successful song. It has been downloaded billions of times. It's been seen on YouTube and so on. And credit to FIFA. FIFA said, this is absolutely fantastic. What we're going to do is that our share of the royalties of Waka Waka, the official FIFA World Cup 2010 song, that's going to go to good causes. And we're going to distribute that money for grassroots football. Fantastic. The record label involved was Sony. And Sony have said, we've been sending money every year to FIFA. But it turns out that the charities that FIFA set up following the 2010 World Cup, they were closed in 2014. So what has happened to the subsequent royalties? And you might say, well, there won't be that much, but actually, for something like this, which was quite an iconic song, as you say, it gets chanted on the terraces and so on, it still gets viewed on social media. There are still significant sums involved. Could it be, to sort of to quote Father Ted, the money has merely been resting in FIFA's account, and they're going to give it to another form of grassroots football in due course? We don't know. What it would be really useful for FIFA to do and really sensible for FIFA to do, we've already spoken about communication, transparency, and so on, is that FIFA need to come to the table and explain what's happened.
Kieran, God knows I'm only a pub expert on charity law and finance, but it seems to me, I'm trying to think of a word that won't get me into trouble, but dodgy at the very least. I mean, that's a long time to wait to distribute that money to where it should be going. So you're absolutely right. The FIFA should be telling us why. I mean, it'd be interesting to know if Shakira knows that it was a special song. It's this time for Africa, Waka Waka, and like you say, we're talking about millions of dollars here. It's again, it's probably for another pod, but the whole FIFA charitable status during World Cup things is quite a difficult one to explain to people. When you say to them that when the World Cup takes place in certain countries, FIFA declare themselves to be a charity in those countries and therefore don't pay tax. Even as you're saying the words, you kind of think, have I got that right? Because it does. Even that seems dodgy. But I mean, that's something to explore and talk about, maybe with one of our legal friends.
Yes. I think this story has not reached the end of the road as yet.
Yeah. Our final story, Kieran, links politics and football, but also you've got, I believe you've got a nice little conspiracy theory about this as well. We're bringing in, I know you like to bring Sir Jim Ratcliffe into most of your conspiracy theories, but this is it's a very interesting story, and I have to say, gone slightly under the radar a little bit.
Yes, former guest on the Price of Football podcast, Jason Stockwood, the co-owner of Grimsby Town Football Club. He has now been called in by the PM and has been made the Minister for Investment by the government. The reason, and this is a conspiracy theory, okay? This is from Kieran Maguire reporting from the grassy knoll, no less. 2 weeks ago, Grimsby Town beat Manchester United in what's probably the biggest upset in the Carabao Cup for many a year. And congratulations to them, and congratulations to Jason as well. Then, a few days later, a week later, he is made the Minister for Investment. So he's had to give up his position at the football club because, in his view, football clubs should be politically neutral. Yeah. And he wants to apply the Caesar's good lady wife position of not only being politically neutral, but being seen to be politically neutral. So he stood down from there. And then a few days later, our very good friend Offshore Jim decides that Ineos is going to pull out of investing in the UK energy industry because there's too much uncertainty in terms of future taxes. Now, there's one thing I know about future rates of tax, is that I don't know what future rates of tax are going to be, but that applies to practically every country in the world. So could it be that Offshore Jim is seeing his arse at being beaten by Grimsby Town? And when Jason then becomes the Minister for Investment, he then turns around and says, well, if that's the way that this government's going to act, I'm not going to invest in the UK, and I'm going to be patriotically living my life in Monaco instead.
I'll tell you what, Kieran, I'm not normally a fan of conspiracy theories, but that ticks all the boxes for me. Where's my stamp that says true on it? So I'm going to, there you go, true. I'll tell you what it also proves, Kieran, is if you have an interview on the Price of Football, it does your career no harm at all. Really? Yeah. So I'm sure that would have been on his CV when the Prime Minister's at the moment is flicking through some CVs of people who might be Minister for Investment. Oh, I say he was on Price of Football quite early. He's in the potential pile. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you'll get ad-free listening, bonus episodes, and more. And the add more includes a Q&A session with us on Zoom, Kieran, which we're going to be doing in a couple of hours. time this evening. Looking forward to that. It's always a great deal of fun. And just go to priceoffootball.com and click on Join the Club to sign up today. If you've got a question you'd like answered on our weekly questions pod, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X, and you can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on that very same website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Tuesday with our next questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, before I start on that, just want to point out we've got a couple of gigs coming up.
Oh, we have, yes.
We are going to... We're going to Belfast.
Yeah.
We're going to be guests of the Northern Ireland Football Association, or the Irish Football Association. So that's going to be in October. So we'll put up a link in the show notes for that, and we will advertise that. And also, and it's sad. It's very sad to announce this in many ways. Today is World Suicide Awareness Day. We're recording this on Wednesday. And I'd like to say, first of all, a huge high five to the Premier League that they are making suicide awareness part of their charitable commitments, their social commitments over the course of this season. And there's been quite a few clubs that have agreed to do that. So we're going to be doing a live show at the Amex Stadium in the Terrace. That's going to be in November. We will again put up further links to that in due course. We hope to get some special guests to turn up as well. We are working behind the scenes on that at present. But all of the proceeds are going to Samaritans. It is a fantastic organisation. And suicide is still the biggest killer of men under 50 years of age and women under the age of 35. We've got all of this money, which is going into fantastic causes for cancer, for other health issues, and so on. But this is something which affects so many people, not just those people that are involved in suicide themselves, if they choose to take their lives, but everybody that surrounds them as well. So it's something we are supporting 100%, and we would love to see as many of you come to both Northern Ireland and the Amex in November. So we'll once we've got our guests finalised, we'll be able to put out who's coming along.
I'm very much looking forward to both of those, Kieran. I have to say, this is unusual, but I'm particularly looking forward to the gig in Brighton, because we did one for the Samaritans at the end of last year, Kieran, when a certain host who had given his time for nothing, who had travelled down. Yeah, it's not that far, but I went down there on a cold night because it's a very good cause. I went, and I'm ashamed to say, Kieran, that some of your fans, and the policemen in particular, saw fit to tease me about the fact that Palace had never played in Europe and that we'd never won anything, and I took it in very good part, I have to say. And now we've won the FA Cup, the Community Shield, and we're in Europe. So I'm telling you, it's payback time, Kieran. It's going to be that copper in particular. He better be sitting way at the back. He's
no longer a copper.
Is he not? Really?
Oh, no.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's great then, because he won't be planting weapons on me as I go in. That's fantastic. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.